Hey guys, this is Tauna. Today we're going to be clearing up some misconceptions about the new Commander bracket system because, it's just come out and revealed kind of yesterday, and there was a whole bunch of feedback, whether it was on my video directly or, that I've seen around the community, and I wanted to kind of, clear up some things that I've been seeing that I don't think are correct or are slight exaggerations and stuff. So, this new bracket system for Commander was announced yesterday, and as you can imagine, people have a lot of thoughts about it. I do feel, as I said, a bit is kind of understood and stuff, but that's why content creators are great, because we can see that kind of stuff. We can be like, hey, here's a video kind of explaining why it's not the end of the earth and everything along those lines. This is the new bracket system here. It kind of ranges from rank 1, which is your casual decks, up to CEDH as you kind of rank 5-1. And there's a broad kind of variety of different restrictions. I don't even think they're restrictions. It's just, have you got this in your deck? Therefore, this is where your deck kind of roughly sits. And that's kind of the big thing here, is that it roughly sits. So we'll go into it. Before we get into it though, make sure you guys subscribe, make sure you share the video around, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to hit 25,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We've got the instant speed news. As soon as news is coming out, we're making videos about it. We're making fun decks. We're making Precon coverage. That's one of the big draws of my channel, is kind of, coverage of the new Precons and everything. So make sure you check that out. So let's get into it. Myth number 1, Wizards is trying to tell me how to play. So this is the big thing here, is that the system is not a hard ban, right? There is no hard bans here, and it's not forced upon everyone. This is a purely helpful tool for people to be able to kind of help design and describe the power level of their decks. And so you can sit down, you can say, hey, my deck is this, and compare it to what other people are playing at that pod, right? Like, they sit down, they have a pod of 4 people, and they will say, hey, we're playing a bracket 2 decks or bracket 3 decks or whatever. So then you can play and match their power level roughly. It's meant to replace that whole sit down, my deck is a 7, my deck is power level 7 or whatever. And there has been times where this would be really useful. At least, my LGS, I generally play with different people each time I go there. So being able to have that kind of discussion where it's, hey, my deck is roughly this, is just really easy when you have a kind of a framework. And I guess that's the thing, is this is a framework to help you kind of build that. There is in no way Wizards saying, hey, your deck has to fit these restrictions. And there is nothing saying you even need to use this system, which we'll get into a bit later. It's just to really help those kind of rule zero discussions of, hey, this is what my deck does. Myth number 2, your deck's power is based off of 1 card now. Now, in theory, yes, the bracket that your deck could fit in or would fit in can change based off you having 1 card put in there. If you add one of the game changes, instantly your deck becomes technically a bracket 3, but in practice it's a lot more open than that. Your deck could be bracket 4, like my Yuma deck is, purely because of 1 card that you've got in there, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's actually a bracket 4 power level deck. So in my Yuma deck, I run 1 mass land destruction card. That technically puts my deck at a bracket 4. That is not really going to be the power level of that deck, I don't think. I think we're looking at more like a power level 3, maybe power level... no, I think a power level 3 deck. Now, that's the thing, is that this kind of gives you the area to be able to discuss that though, right? You can sit down, you can say, hey, look, my deck is technically a bracket 4 because of this 1 mass land destruction deck card in here. You guys are playing bracket 3. Do you mind if I play this deck? It's only that because of this 1 card. And generally, people are going to be open to discussing that. It's just giving you that framework that, to have that discussion. And that's the big thing here, is just having that framework to be able to have that discussion easier, which is what the whole point of this is. It's not meant to restrict your decks. It's not meant to restrict your deck building. It's not meant to make it so that you have to be at this power level or anything. It's just enabling you to be able to have this discussion easier, which is going to be a reoccurring thing throughout all of these different things. Myth 3. I guess I can just stomp into bracket 1 with my Edgar deck now. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Be a dick all you want. Whatever. If that's really what you want to do. This isn't any different to currently now, though. If you sit down at a table and everyone's like, oh, hey, we're just all playing Precons, slightly upgraded Precons, and you whip out your slightly upgraded Edgar Markov Precon, which, you've slightly upgraded it by adding in some infinite mana sources or whatever, Sure, this isn't any different to what you're doing right now. If you really want to go to a low powered deck and stomp the F out of them, go ahead. Just because your deck is technically a 1 or a 2 power or bracket, that doesn't mean that in practice it is. This is going to be partially an honesty / don't be a dick system. And as Gavin said, you can opt into saying, your deck is higher tier. If, I have a look at one of my decks and I'm like, hey, this is a bracket, a bracket 2 deck here, but it's going to absolutely stomp any precons, then obviously, I can be like, hey, yeah, that deck is actually a bracket 3. In practice, it's a bracket 3. Technically, it's a bracket 2. That's the whole thing. It's just a whole kind of, you got to judge it based off of your decks. As I said, there's the framework sitting there to easily enable that conversation. But if you want to go and curb stomp people because you built a bracket 1 deck that's as strong as possible, that's your right if you really wanted to, but you're not going to really make friends doing that. And again, that's no different to what you can do right now. Myth number 4, this will be difficult for new players. Now, if you are a new player, let me know, but there is obviously a lot to kind of get used to with Magic already. And it's going to take some getting used to for not even just new players, for everyone. Now, this is not going to affect that kitchen table commander. If I go out, I'm playing a game with my son, it's not going to affect that, right? It's going to help me be able to gauge what deck I want to play against him, sure, but it's not going to really affect that, kitchen table, playing around with your mates, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But new players already, when they're building a deck, need to learn stuff like, what the bans are, the card legality. Technically, some cards aren't legal and some cards are legal. Usually in Commander, most cards are legal, but there are some that are banned, or there are some like, the Infinity cards, some of the Acorn cards, some of the gold border cards. And technically, I don't think I'd yell at anyone. Well, not yell. I wouldn't have a go at anyone for playing a gold border card because it's just, yeah, it is still technically the card is legal. The base card is legal. It's just that version of it's not. And the format rules, right? Like when you're building a commander deck, there's already format rules. Like, you've got to be singleton. You've got to, singleton except for, and this. There's a lot of stuff there. Now, this is why the community and the content creators are going to be huge here, because we can help these newer players and get them used to this kind of stuff. But again, they're already this kind of set stuff they need to learn when they're building decks, and stuff like Archidect and Moxfield and stuff like that are already going to build these systems in, so it's easier for them to be able to learn as they are looking at the decks from there. Plus, once this is more set, Wizards can start pushing it out to teach it more, including it in Precon leaflets, that kind of stuff, to make it easier for those newer players to kind of learn this system. And honestly, I don't think it's insanely difficult, right? Some other card games have way more complicated rules than this. Stuff even if you have a look at the Pokemon card game with their, I think they're called Spec Ops cards and stuff. You could only include one of those and stuff. I think they actually had it on the cards though, which was useful. But still, there's different things that are going to be obviously difficult when you're starting to learn the game. I don't think this is one that's insane, especially once, they get a more precise web page done up to help kind of learn it. Myth number 5, brackets only define your deck. That's the thing, is that while a bracket does define your deck, and strictly, yes, it is a bracket X deck, it's more about helping define the game or pod that you're playing in, right? So you can sit down and play, and they're saying, hey, we're going to be playing bracket 1 decks. So you can sit down and be like, okay, this is my, roughly bracket 1 deck, right? So it's just meant to help you define your pod, set up your pod of people, and help match the power level that the pod is playing at. So that way you all have, decks that are roughly the same level without having to be like, okay, we're sitting down, we at this table, we don't really play many tutors, we don't play any infinite combos unless they're late game ones, then you could play that and stuff. Instead, now you can sit down and be like, okay, we're playing bracket 3 decks roughly, and then you can whip out your deck and be like, all right, well, mine's a bracket 3, blah, 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 blah. Even then, you don't need to necessarily go into that blah, blah, blah. It depends on what the table's looking for. It's just to really help that kind of matchmaking thing. And that's the big thing, is that matchmaking system of hooking it all in together so people can find games easier that match what their deck does. All right, myth number 6. I hate the Wizards is trying to change the way I play with my friends. Wizards don't care about your friends and how you're playing with them. Well, they might care about your friends and how they pay money, but they don't care about how you're playing with your friends, right? If you want to completely ignore this system, go ahead. If your LGS is ignoring the system, go ahead. It doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't matter. Wizards do not care how you play with your friends. It's not compulsory. It's just to really help that matchmaking and give the tools for that matchmaking when you go to the random people that you're playing with at conventions or your LGS or whatever. When my friends come over, we're not going to sit down and we're going to be like, okay, we're playing bracket 3 decks. I hope you've got your bracket 3 deck out. No, I'm just going to be like, John Jackson, can you put that freaking Necron deck away because I just want to play my Precon, please. Like, it's just to help you build up that, build up a tool or framework when you are going and playing with random people. All right, myth number 6. Now they're going to design Precons to be weaker. Now this one is based off of the game changes, right? The game changes and the bracket system, because the bracket 2 is roughly where all Precons sit. And that's what they said. Gavin said, bracket 2 is your Precon level. But just because bracket 2 is your Precon level, Gavin literally said, this is not going to change how we're building Precons for a while or anything like that. And there still is going to be potential game changes within Precons. They've usually it's like Jessica's will. There hasn't been a huge amount of other game changes within Precons. I'm quickly having a look through the list here. I don't think any of these other ones have been within Precons. So I think, maybe some of the multicolor ones there. But most of these aren't within Precons. And most of the time they aren't going to include them within Precons because the game changes aren't really Precon level anyway. So this isn't going to change how they're going to be building Precons. The only thing that did really show up within Precons was card combos and 2 card combos potentially. We still might see that. Who knows? They rarely had them anyway. Realistically, it's not likely to make any changes to Precons or very minor changes to Precons. In fact, Gavin literally said about, introducing new Precons down the track designed around brackets. So say a new set comes out, they may release some bracket 1 decks alongside it, which is just fun, memey decks that aren't necessarily designed to win. People want less product, and that's a way that they can be like, hey, this is a fun memey deck. If you don't want to buy it, you don't have to now because it's just a fun meme deck, right? I don't know. I kind of like that idea around releasing them. I do also like the idea of going the opposite end where they release, some bracket 4 level Precons. And this Precon's actually really strong, and then people can pick it up and be like, okay, this is actually, a pretty competitive deck. Pokemon already does this where they release the winners decks from their competitions and stuff. And honestly, that would just be really awesome in my opinion to kind of see that level of, support within Magic of them actually releasing the winning decks. They did it on Magic Arena as well. I think they may have done it in real life, but it hasn't been for a while. And I think it was also the gold border one. Yeah, it was the gold border ones back in the day of the world competition ones. All right. Myth number 8. Well, XYZ isn't on the game changers list, so this whole thing is doomed. That's the whole point of this, though, is the game changers list, the 40 cards that are selected for it, were a very early iteration of this. And this is this system is all a very early iteration. This is an early beta. They want feedback. The whole point of them announcing and releasing this stuff now is so that way when they go to the MagicCon in not San Diego. What was I saying? Whichever one, the San Francisco? No. Oh, wow. My brain's Chicago. I think it might be Chicago up next. I don't know. Whichever MagicCon is happening in a US country, a US city coming up, they can get that feedback. They can shape that feedback and warp the system around the feedback. And even if you're not, as a part, even if you're not going to be there, you can still pass along that feedback. In fact, I would love to get your feedback about this because I have I consider him a friend. I don't know if he considers me a friend yet. I know a guy who is on the Commander panel, and I would love to be able to share your feedback with him, and I would love to, I'm going to share my feedback with him and stuff as well. That's the whole point of this being released now, is to get the feedback in and be able to discuss it and be able to pass it along and be able to kind of, help shape this system. Very, very similar to how the original Commander system worked and everything, is that, it was built off of feedback and the community and everything like that. This is what this is meant to be built on as well. And, Gavin has straight up said about how he wants all this feedback and stuff. So make sure you pass that along, whether it's to myself, whether it's to, Attack on Cardboard, or whether it's on to any of the people on the Commander's Rule, not Commander's Rule Committee, Commander Council, or just straight to Gavin, whatever you want to do. All right. So thoughts, let me know. Let me know if this clarified anything for you, because, I think there was a bunch of misconceptions yesterday about it. I hope you guys had a wonderful day, and goodbye.